Under a cool autumn sky, on a stretch of rural highway, a modest roadside diner known as Route 77 Diner had long been a haven for weary travelers and a gathering spot for locals. Its neon sign flickered against the encroaching dusk, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon mingled with the crisp, earthy scent of fallen leaves. For decades, the diner's chipped vinyl booths and retro counter had borne witness to everyday conversations, heartfelt reunions, and the quiet hum of small-town life. But on one fateful evening, that comforting routine was violently disrupted, and a mystery began to unravel that would forever alter the community's sense of safety. It started as a seemingly ordinary night. The diner's owner, Malcolm Rivers, a gentle soul known for his warm greetings and attentive service, had just closed up for the evening after a long day of serving regulars and new faces alike. A few customers lingered over their after-dinner coffee, and the sound of soft jazz played in the background. As the clock edged toward midnight, a sudden piercing scream shattered the stillness. In the narrow alley behind the building, where shadows danced among discarded newspapers and empty takeout boxes, a local truck driver named Curtis Lane discovered the lifeless body of Bryce Tucker, a young mechanic well known in town for his easy smile and quiet reliability. Bryce lay slumped against a graffiti-covered wall, his eyes wide open in a final, uncomprehending gaze. His work boots, still dusty from the day's labor, were partially buried in a small puddle formed by a recent rain. Clutched tightly in his hand was a crumpled scrap of paper bearing a terse, almost frantic message. "Some truths are better left buried." Curtis, his voice shaking as he dialed 911, could barely comprehend the horror before him. Within minutes, flashing lights and uniformed officers transformed the sleepy alley into a bustling crime scene. Detective Harper Finch, a methodical investigator with an innate knack for uncovering hidden details, arrived on the scene. As she stepped into the narrow space between the diner's back door and the weathered brick wall, Harper's eyes swept over every detail: the precise angle at which Bryce's body had collapsed, the faint trail of blood that led toward the service door of the diner, and the torn note that hinted at a motive far beyond a random mugging. There was an eerie orderliness about the scene, a stillness that suggested that whatever had happened had been carefully orchestrated. Over the following days, Harper Finch immersed herself in the investigation, determined to uncover the secrets behind Bryce Tucker's untimely demise. Her first step was to interview those closest to the diner. Malcolm Rivers, the owner, was visibly shaken. Bryce was a regular fixer, a good man who helped everyone out when they needed it, he recalled, eyes clouded with disbelief. "I remember the last time I saw him. He was working on an old truck by the parking lot and mentioned something about a discrepancy in his invoices. I thought it was just a mix-up, but now, I don't know." His recollections, though disjointed, hinted at an undercurrent of unease that had troubled Bryce in the weeks leading up to that fateful night. At Route 77 Diner, several employees provided additional details. Gina Martinez, a waitress known for her compassionate nature, confided that Bryce had recently become preoccupied with an unusual set of numbers. "He'd been scribbling on napkins during his breaks," Gina said quietly. "He kept muttering about invoices that didn't match up, parts that were missing from orders. He said there was a pattern, something he couldn't ignore. I didn't think much of it at first, but now, it seems he might have been onto something serious." Another employee, a cook named Jerome Fields, recalled overhearing Bryce speak on his cell phone late one evening, his voice tense as he asked if anyone had questioned the missing items from a recent shipment of engine parts. "He sounded worried," Jerome added. "It wasn't the usual friendly chatter we're used to. It was like he feared for his life." Determined to piece together Bryce's final days, Detective Finch secured a search warrant for his small, cluttered apartment on the edge of town. The place was modest but reflected a deep-seated pride in his work: a collection of auto repair magazines, a neatly organized toolbox in the corner, and personal photos of him, alongside satisfied customers. In a desk drawer hidden beneath a stack of old invoices, Harper discovered Bryce's leather-bound journal. Its pages, filled with precise, hurried notes and sketches of engine parts and shipment records, revealed a side of Bryce that few had known. Early entries were mundane, details of his daily work and the routine repairs he performed. However, as the entries advanced, his tone grew increasingly anxious. One entry, dated just 5 days before his death, read, "I've noticed that the orders for spare parts are always a few items short. It's like someone is skimming off the top. I must get to the bottom of this before it escalates." His handwriting, once steady, began to show signs of trembling urgency. The final entry was abruptly cut off, as if he had been interrupted mid-thought. Digital forensic experts managed to recover fragments of deleted text messages from Bryce's old mobile phone. Among these were terse exchanges with a mysterious contact identified only as Gale. One partial message warned, "Back off or your numbers won't add up for much longer." The unyielding tone of the message was chilling, a clear indication that Bryce's inquiries had caught the attention of someone with considerable influence. Although the identity of Gale remained obscured by layers of encryption, the threat was unmistakable. As Detective Finch dug deeper, she turned her attention to the operations of the local auto parts distributor, a small family business known as Reliable Spares. Reliable Spares had long been the backbone of the town's automotive repair industry, supplying parts to local mechanics and fleet operators alike. Publicly, the company was celebrated for its commitment to quality and service. But behind the polished storefront and friendly customer service, Harper began to uncover signs of financial irregularities. Internal audit records obtained from a whistleblower revealed that over the past year, several orders for high-value parts had consistently fallen short of the expected quantities. Although the discrepancies were small in isolation, perhaps a couple of bolts or a few extra spark plugs each time, the cumulative effect when compared with the invoices amounted to a significant loss. Forensic accountants working with the task force determined that these shortfalls were far too systematic to be accidental. They uncovered a series of transactions, each one recorded as a routine adjustment, that ultimately diverted funds to an offshore account. The pattern suggested that someone within Reliable Spares had been manipulating the orders for personal gain. Detective Finch theorized that Bryce, in his role as a mechanic and a conscientious citizen, had begun to suspect that the company was involved in a broader scheme of financial misappropriation, one that might have ties to organized criminal activity in the area. To further complicate matters, Harper received a series of anonymous tips. One handwritten note, delivered discreetly to her at the police station, read, "Some balances are never meant to be evened out." Another text, received on an untraceable burner phone, warned, "If you follow the numbers, they will lead you into dangerous territory." The messages were cryptic, but carried an unmistakable edge of threat, reinforcing the notion that Bryce's investigation had disturbed powerful individuals who preferred to keep their operations hidden. Detective Finch then arranged to interview the owner of Reliable Spares, a middle-aged man named Warren Giles. Warren was a stoic, no-nonsense entrepreneur with a reputation for integrity in public, but under questioning, his answers grew increasingly guarded. "Our records are maintained meticulously," he insisted, his voice measured. "Minor discrepancies can occur in any business, but we have nothing to hide." Yet, inconsistencies in his account and discrepancies in the numbers raised by forensic auditors left Harper unconvinced. Several former employees of Reliable Spares, when interviewed under condition of anonymity, hinted that Warren had been under pressure from an unknown partner, someone who had insisted on balancing the books in a manner that defied conventional ethics. As the investigation broadened, digital forensic analysts discovered that the offshore account receiving the diverted funds was linked to a shell company registered under an obscure name. Tracing the financial trail through a maze of transactions, they identified a pattern that suggested deliberate, calculated adjustments to the orders. The shortfalls in Reliable Spares invoices were systematically timed to coincide with periods of high demand, moments when mechanics like Bryce would be urgently in need of parts. The evidence pointed to a scheme that wasn't just about financial gain, it was about control, a clandestine operation that exploited the trust of the local community for profit. At the same time, Detective Finch received corroborative testimony from an independent auto repair shop owner, Clarissa Boyd, who had long been a competitor to Reliable Spares. Clarissa recalled that a few months earlier, she had noticed a marked decline in the availability of certain high-quality parts. It was as if someone was deliberately undercutting the market, she said, frustration evident in her voice. "I asked around, and I learned that Reliable Spares had been reporting higher inventory levels than what was actually available. I suspected something wasn't right." Her testimony, combined with the digital and financial evidence, strengthened the case against those responsible for the discrepancies. As Detective Finch compiled her findings, the picture of a far-reaching conspiracy began to emerge, a network that extended from the local auto parts distributor to a shadowy financial operation operating offshore. Bryce Tucker's meticulous record-keeping and quiet determination to uncover the truth had inadvertently drawn the attention of a group willing to take drastic measures to protect their scheme. The evidence now pointed to a deliberate manipulation of supply records, a pattern so precise that it left little doubt about the operation's existence. In a coordinated effort involving local police, federal agents, and forensic accountants, search warrants were executed at multiple locations associated with reliable spares. In a dusty warehouse on the outskirts of town, investigators uncovered stacks of unaccounted-for parts, along with detailed spreadsheets that matched the anomalies documented in Bryce's journal. The physical evidence provided a damning link between the altered records and the financial irregularities, a tangible record of the systematic diversion of resources. Digital experts, working tirelessly to reconstruct the timeline of the deleted messages, were able to piece together a nearly complete series of exchanges between Bryce and his anonymous correspondent, Gale. The reconstructed messages, though fragmented, revealed a relentless stream of threats and warnings, urging Bryce to cease his investigation. The language was clinical yet foreboding, a clear message that someone with considerable power was determined to keep the truth submerged. With the overwhelming evidence in hand, Detective Finch compiled an exhaustive report that detailed every facet of the investigation, from the discovery of Bryce Tucker's body in the alley behind Route 77 Diner to the intricate web of digital communications, altered financial records, and corroborative witness testimonies. The report, a meticulously organized dossier spanning hundreds of pages, was presented to the district attorney in a series of confidential briefings. The district attorney, recognizing the far-reaching implications of the case, promptly convened a grand jury to review the evidence. In the austere surroundings of a county courthouse, the grand jury deliberated over the amassed evidence. Expert witnesses testified about the methods used to manipulate the inventory records and the digital forensic techniques that had recovered the deleted messages. Their testimony revealed a pattern of deliberate interference, a sophisticated scheme that had siphoned off hundreds of dollars worth of auto parts over the course of a year. The grand jury ultimately returned indictments on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to homicide, directly linking the financial manipulation to the death of Bryce Tucker. While the indictments named several mid-level managers and technicians at Reliable Spares, many of the top conspirators managed to avoid full accountability by exploiting legal complexities and the protective barriers of corporate structure. Their identities remained partially obscured, leaving a lingering sense of unresolved injustice in the community. The subsequent trial was a grueling, emotionally charged process that captivated the small town and drew national media attention. In a crowded courtroom filled with local residents, auto repair shop owners, and family members of those affected by the scheme, federal prosecutors presented their case with painstaking precision. Digital forensic analysts demonstrated, using enhanced imaging and data reconstruction techniques, how the deleted emails and text messages formed a clear chain of evidence. Forensic accountants presented detailed charts and graphs that illustrated how minute discrepancies in inventory records, when aggregated over time, amounted to a significant misappropriation of funds. Local experts in supply chain management testified about the unusual adjustments in the orders and the systematic nature of the theft. Throughout the trial, Detective Finch took the stand and delivered her testimony with a calm, unwavering resolve. She described the discovery of Bryce Tucker's body, the painstaking recovery of his personal journal, and the digital trail that pointed to a covert network operating within Reliable Spares. Every detail, from the faint fingerprint on a stray paper to the precise timing of the remote system logins, was presented as incontrovertible evidence of a deliberate cover-up. Her words carried the weight of a community's grief and the quiet fury of those who refused to allow corruption to go unpunished. The courtroom fell into a reflective hush as former employees recounted their experiences. One technician, his voice trembling with suppressed anger, described how he had once overheard a manager say, "If anyone asks too many questions, they'll be out of work and out of the picture." Such testimonies underscored the pervasive culture of fear that had enabled the operation to continue unchecked for far too long. In the end, several mid-level managers and technicians were convicted on charges ranging from fraud and conspiracy to accessory to homicide. They received lengthy prison sentences, and their names were recorded as the operatives who had tampered with the vital records and diverted critical supplies. Yet, many in the courtroom and the broader community felt that true justice had not been fully served. The upper echelons of the conspiracy, those who had orchestrated the manipulation from behind layers of corporate power, managed to avoid full exposure by exploiting legal loopholes and maintaining a veil of secrecy. Their identities were redacted from public documents, leaving behind a persistent sense of ambiguity and unresolved injustice. In the aftermath of the trial, Route 77 Diner and the surrounding community were forever changed. The case of Bryce Tucker's murder, and the subsequent unraveling of a complex scheme, shook the town to its core, forcing local businesses to re-examine their practices and prompting government officials to tighten oversight of supply chains and financial transactions. Public hearings were held, and community leaders rallied to demand that similar abuses never be allowed to tarnish the reputation of their trusted institutions again. Independent journalists produced investigative reports that delved deeper into the clandestine network, and academic seminars discussed the case as a landmark example of how even the smallest discrepancies can reveal a vast web of corruption. For Detective Finch, every new piece of evidence uncovered in the investigation was a reminder of the high stakes involved in the relentless pursuit of truth. Late at night, when the town's quiet streets were bathed in the soft glow of streetlights and the distant hum of passing vehicles, she would sit in her modest office, reviewing Bryce's journal and the painstakingly reconstructed digital trails. Though the names of the top conspirators remained partially concealed, the tangible impact of the case, both in terms of legal reform and community awareness, served as a powerful vindication of her efforts. Over time, the legacy of Bryce Tucker's determination and sacrifice became deeply interwoven with the identity of the town. Memorials were erected near Route 77 Diner, and a scholarship was established in his name to support local students pursuing careers in forensic science and criminal justice. The case continued to be a subject of study in local colleges, a poignant reminder of the need for vigilance and ethical accountability in every facet of community life. Public discussions on transparent business practices and ethical oversight grew louder, and independent watchdog groups formed to monitor the activities of key local businesses. Though many questions remained, such as the true identity of the mysterious Gale, who had threatened Bryce, and the full extent of the financial network that had facilitated the theft, the story of the case was clear. It was a saga of quiet determination, systemic manipulation, and the tragic cost of uncovering hidden truths. It served as a stark warning that in any community, no matter how small or unassuming, the pursuit of honesty can sometimes reveal the darkest corners of human ambition. For Detective Finch, each new case was approached with the memory of Bryce Tucker's unwavering commitment to integrity. Every inconsistency, every subtle anomaly, was treated as a potential thread in the vast tapestry of truth waiting to be unraveled. Her legacy, built on years of relentless inquiry, continued to inspire a new generation of investigators, determined to leave no secret unexamined. And so as the first light of dawn broke over the rural highway, and the neon glow of Route 77 Diner slowly faded into the morning mist, the community of that small town was forever marked by the case. It was a case that had exposed a hidden network of greed and deception, and had cost a good man his life. Yet it had also sparked a powerful movement, a collective vow to hold those in power accountable, and to ensure that the truth, however deeply buried, would eventually come to light. In the end, the story was not merely about a murder or a financial scam. It was about the courage to question the status quo, the resilience of those who stand up against corruption, and the enduring belief that every hidden secret, no matter how well concealed, must one day be revealed. The legacy of Bryce Tucker and the determined efforts of Detective Finch became a symbol, a beacon for a community that would forever cherish the value of transparency and the vital importance of protecting its shared integrity. Though the battle for justice was far from over, and many mysteries still lingered in the shadows, the case left an indelible mark on the town's collective conscience. It served as a reminder that even in the most ordinary settings, a humble diner, a quiet street, a modest office, the struggle for truth is a timeless endeavor, a pursuit that can transform lives and reshape communities one uncovered detail at a time. Under a clear, expansive sky, the quiet town of Redcliffe had always thrived on its sense of community and a lifestyle that moved as slowly as the nearby river. Neighbors greeted each other warmly on long, dusty streets, and the local diner and hardware store were as familiar as the faces that passed by every morning. Yet, even in a place where everyone knew one another, secrets sometimes festered in silence, and one such secret would soon shatter the town's idyllic calm. It began on a crisp evening in early September. Redcliffe's residents gathered at the community park for the annual summer festival, a celebration of local art, music, and tradition that had been held every year for decades. The park buzzed with laughter and music, with children darting between brightly colored tents and elders seated on weathered benches beneath ancient oak trees. At the edge of the festivities, in a quiet part of town near the meandering river, a sudden commotion drew the attention of several locals. A young man returning from the festival had discovered a body along the bank where the water gently lapped the muddy shore. The victim was quickly identified as Donovan Price, a local handyman known for his reliable work on everything from leaky roofs to broken fences. His warm manner and ready smile had made him a familiar presence throughout the town, and his disappearance from the lives of those who depended on him was met with shock and grief. Donovan lay face down on the riverbank, his worn boots partially submerged in the water, and his hands were outstretched as if reaching for help. Next to him was a torn scrap of paper, its ink smudged by both rain and time. The brief message, scrawled hastily, read, "Some truths must never be revealed." Within minutes, local officers, unaccustomed to violent crime in their peaceful community, arrived on the scene. Under the watchful eye of Detective Andrea Summers, a thoughtful investigator whose gentle persistence and careful attention to detail had earned her respect in the department, the area was cordoned off. Andrea knelt beside Donovan's body, studying every small clue, the angle at which he had collapsed, the trace of a struggle indicated by scattered debris, and the uneven edges of the note that suggested a desperate final act. There was a sense of deliberate order in the scene, a precision that hinted at a calculated murder rather than a random act of violence. Over the following days, Detective Summers began her painstaking investigation by speaking with those who had last seen Donovan. Many recalled that, in the weeks before his death, he had been unusually secretive. Mike Ellis, a local carpenter who often worked alongside him, remembered a day when Donovan had spoken in hushed tones about discrepancies he'd noticed in some old maintenance records for the town hall, a record of work orders and supplies that had mysteriously shortchanged the town's budget for repairs. He said things were off, like someone was altering numbers on purpose, Mike recalled, his eyes clouded with uncertainty. "I thought he was just overthinking it, but now I'm not so sure." Another witness, a grocery store clerk named Stephanie White, remembered Donovan leaving his job early one afternoon. "He looked troubled, almost scared," Stephanie said softly. "He kept checking his phone and muttering about missing parts and account numbers not matching. I never imagined it would end like this." His colleagues described him as a dependable man who rarely let personal worries interfere with his work, a man who had silently carried his concerns until they had grown too burdensome to ignore. Detective Summers obtained a search warrant for Donovan's modest apartment, a simple space decorated with relics of a life dedicated to practical work and community service. Among everyday tools and faded photographs was a battered notebook bound in worn leather. Its pages contained detailed records of his daily work and observations, but as she flipped through them, Andrea found that the entries took on a different tone in the last few weeks. Earlier pages were filled with routine details, lists of repair jobs completed, sketches of broken fixtures he'd mended, and the names of local businesses he'd served. However, the later entries were filled with anxious scribbles and hastily drawn diagrams. In one entry dated just 5 days before his death, Donovan had written, "The maintenance records for Town Hall are inconsistent. There are orders for supplies that never arrived and invoices that don't add up. I suspect someone is siphoning off resources and altering the logs to cover it up." His writing was urgent, the margins cluttered with crossed-out numbers and arrowed notes, as though he had been piecing together a puzzle that no one else dared to see. Digital forensic experts later managed to recover fragments of deleted text messages from Donovan's old smartphone. Among these were terse exchanges with an unknown number that signed off as cipher. One message, partially recovered, warned, "Stop digging, or your world will crumble." The brevity and cold tone of the message provided a chilling clue. Donovan's investigations had not gone unnoticed, and someone with significant means was determined to silence him. At this point, Detective Summers began to suspect that Donovan had uncovered something far larger than simple administrative errors. The investigation turned its focus toward the town's Central Records Office, the keeper of decades of public documents and historical records that documented every public project, every building repair, and every maintenance order in Redcliffe. For years the town had prided itself on the integrity of its records, which had been maintained with care by a dedicated team. Yet when Andrea examined the public ledgers and cross-checked them with Donovan's notes, she found a disconcerting pattern, a series of subtle, almost imperceptible discrepancies that when taken together formed a clear deviation from standard practice. Certain invoices for building repairs were consistently short by small amounts, and parts orders for the town hall and other public structures were repeatedly recorded as adjusted by a few percentages that seemed designed to cover up missing supplies. The adjustments, when tallied over the course of several years, amounted to a significant diversion of funds, a hidden scheme that, if exposed, could undermine the entire financial credibility of the town. Detective Summers arranged interviews with the employees at the records office. One veteran clerk, who wished to remain anonymous, admitted that he had noticed unusual activity on the system in recent months. "There were days when I'd see numbers change before my very eyes," he confided in a low voice. "It was as if someone was remotely altering the entries. I always assumed it was a glitch, but now I think it was deliberate." His testimony lent a somber tone to the investigation, suggesting that the manipulation of records was not just a series of isolated errors but a coordinated effort. As the investigation deepened, further evidence emerged, linking the irregularities to a local contractor known as Arnold Brooks, a man whose name had become synonymous with large public projects in Redcliffe. Arnold's company had been responsible for numerous repairs and upgrades in town, and his bids had often come in significantly under budget. When questioned, Arnold insisted that his lower bids were the result of competitive pricing and efficient operations, yet several former employees of his firm hinted that Arnold had in fact been involved in fraudulent schemes to undercut competitors, and that he had secretly colluded with certain town officials to divert funds. One former project manager recalled that Arnold had once told him, "If anyone asks too many questions about the invoices, we'll adjust the numbers until no one even notices." Although the manager's voice trembled as he recounted the memory, the implication was clear. The manipulation of records might be part of a broader, more sinister scheme involving corruption and collusion between a contractor and public officials. Digital forensic experts continued to work on the recovered messages, and one particularly disturbing email fragment caught Detective Summers' attention. Sent from an anonymous account and heavily encrypted, the message read, "Keep quiet, or the numbers will expose you." The stark threat, delivered in a detached tone, was unmistakably a warning to halt any further investigation into the discrepancies. It was now evident that Donovan had not been alone in his search for the truth. Someone powerful was watching his every move, and that same force was willing to use intimidation, and possibly violence, to protect its interests. With the mounting evidence, Detective Summers compiled an exhaustive report detailing every aspect of the case. The dossier included handwritten notes from Donovan's journal, digital reconstructions of the deleted messages, cross-referenced public records and testimonies from multiple witnesses. The report painted a damning picture of a conspiracy that stretched back years, a network in which public funds were siphoned off through minor adjustments, and where any attempts to expose the truth were met with deadly force. Realizing the gravity of the situation, federal agents were brought in to assist with the more technical aspects of the investigation. Using advanced data recovery and digital forensics techniques, they reconstructed a nearly complete timeline of the alterations in the town's records, revealing that the discrepancies had been systematically implemented during periods when public scrutiny was at its lowest. The cumulative effect was a staggering misappropriation of funds that was funneled into an offshore account associated with a shell corporation. The financial trail was irrefutable. It pointed directly to the collusion between a local contractor, Arnold Brooks, and a group of town officials who had authorized the changes. In a series of coordinated raids, law enforcement obtained search warrants for several offices and storage facilities linked to Reliable Records, the company that managed the town's public files. In a dusty, cluttered filing room in the county courthouse, investigators uncovered original copies of property deeds and financial ledgers that had been subtly altered, documents that, when compared with their archived originals, revealed a deliberate effort to erase inconvenient details and shift significant sums of money. The physical evidence was overwhelming, and it confirmed that Donovan Price had been on the verge of exposing a network of corruption that reached into the heart of Red Cliff's public finances. Detective Summers, with her team of dedicated officers and federal specialists, organized a series of grand jury sessions to review the comprehensive evidence. In those closed-door meetings held in a modest county courthouse, expert witnesses testified about the digital methods used to alter records, the statistical improbability of the discrepancies occurring naturally, and the historical context of corruption that had plagued Red Cliff for years. The testimonies were precise and unyielding, and they left little room for doubt. The alterations were a calculated operation designed to divert funds from public projects, and anyone who dared to expose them risked disappearing without a trace. The grand jury ultimately returned indictments on multiple charges, including fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to homicide, directly linking the systematic record manipulation to the death of Donovan Price. Several mid-level public officials and contractors were named in the indictments, though the highest-ranking conspirators remained hidden behind layers of legal redaction, a bitter reminder that while significant progress had been made, some powerful figures had still managed to shield themselves from full accountability. The subsequent trial was a lengthy, emotionally charged affair that captivated not only Red Cliff but also broader audiences interested in the interplay between public accountability and corporate collusion. In a packed courtroom where citizens, journalists, and academic experts gathered, federal prosecutors presented their case with a combination of meticulous digital evidence and poignant witness testimonies. Forensic analysts detailed how the deleted messages had been reconstructed to reveal a clear chain of threats, while forensic accountants presented intricate charts showing how minor discrepancies, when aggregated over time, had resulted in the diversion of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Local historians provided a sobering account of Red Cliff's past, of a town repeatedly scarred by hidden scandals and quiet betrayals. Throughout the trial, Detective Summers took the stand to deliver her testimony with quiet strength. She recounted the grim discovery at the riverbank, the painstaking efforts to recover Donovan's journal, and the digital trail that had ultimately led to the exposure of the clandestine network. Her voice, steady and measured, conveyed not only the facts of the case, but also the deep personal toll it had taken on the community. Every detail, from the weathered handwriting in Donovan's final notes to the exact timing of the system log entries, was presented as evidence of a deliberate cover-up orchestrated to silence a man who had dared to challenge the status quo. While the trial resulted in the conviction of several mid-level administrators and contractors on charges of fraud and conspiracy, many in Red Cliff felt that complete justice had not been served. The top conspirators, whose identities were carefully redacted in public documents, had managed to escape the full extent of legal repercussions by exploiting complex loopholes and the protective veneer of their long-established influence. The verdict, though a significant victory for accountability, left a lingering sense of unresolved injustice, a stark reminder that in some cases the powerful can still remain hidden behind layers of secrecy. In the aftermath of the trial, Red Cliff slowly began to rebuild. The town's officials, now under intense public scrutiny, introduced a series of reforms designed to ensure transparency in public records and financial transactions. Independent audits were instituted, and new oversight committees were formed to monitor all public projects and contracts. Public forums and town hall meetings became regular events, where citizens could voice their concerns and demand that the lessons of the past be carried forward into the future. The community, once shocked into silence by the tragic loss of Donovan Price, now found a renewed resolve to protect its integrity and to never allow corruption to go unchecked. Local journalists, inspired by the courage of those who had come forward during the investigation, produced in-depth reports and documentaries that chronicled the case. Academic seminars and public lectures explored the implications of the record-altering scheme and its impact on the town's legacy. The story of Donovan Price, a man who had dedicated his life to uncovering the truth about public finances and who had paid the ultimate price for his determination, became a symbol of the struggle between transparency and secrecy, a rallying cry for those who believed that every hidden secret must one day see the light of day. For Detective Summers, every new case that crossed her path carried echoes of that fateful day by the river. In the quiet solitude of her modest office, lit by a single desk lamp and lined with case files and personal mementos of past investigations, she would often reread the recovered journal entries and examine the reconstructed digital trails. Each artifact was a reminder of the heavy burden of truth and the continuous effort required to hold the powerful accountable. Though the highest-ranking conspirators still evaded full exposure, the tangible changes in Redcliffe's policies and the renewed public vigilance stood as a testament to the impact of one man's quest for integrity. Over the following years, the case became interwoven with Redcliffe's identity. Memorials were established in public spaces, a simple bench by the river inscribed with the words, "In every quest for truth, a sacrifice is made," and annual community events celebrated the values of transparency and accountability. Independent studies examined the case as a paradigm of modern corruption and the importance of digital forensics in uncovering systematic cover-ups. The legacy of Donovan Price and the courageous efforts of Detective Summers served as an enduring beacon, inspiring new generations to question official narratives and to stand up against injustice, no matter how deeply entrenched it might be. Even as the town returned to its daily rhythms, the familiar chime of the clock tower, the steady flow of traffic along its main street, and the quiet hum of community life, the memory of that autumn day remained a permanent part of Redcliffe's collective consciousness. In every archived record that was now subject to independent review, in every public debate about civic ethics, and in every determined investigation into potential irregularities, the spirit of accountability shone through, a quiet, unyielding reminder that the truth, however difficult to uncover, must always be pursued. For Detective Summers, the battle was far from over. Each new inconsistency in the records, every unexplained anomaly in a public project, served as a catalyst for further inquiry. With the lessons learned from the Donovan Price case firmly etched in her mind, she approached every investigation with the same meticulous dedication, the same unwavering belief that no matter how powerful the forces of corruption, the light of truth would eventually reveal the hidden details. And in that relentless pursuit, every uncovered document, every examined ledger, every whispered tip was a small victory, a testament to the enduring importance of transparency in safeguarding the community's future. In the end, the story of Redcliffe's dark chapter was not defined solely by legal outcomes or the numbers that had been manipulated over decades. It was defined by the courage of one man who dared to question the official records, by the determination of an investigator who refused to let secrets remain buried, and by a community that in the wake of tragedy chose to rise above and demand that every hidden truth be brought into the light. It was a story of loss and perseverance, of a small town united by a common desire for accountability, and of the enduring power of truth, a power that no matter how carefully concealed will always find a way to emerge, one painstaking detail at a time. And so, as the sun set over Redcliffe, and the river's gentle murmur blended with the quiet conversations of its citizens, the legacy of that fateful autumn lived on, a permanent reminder that in every corner of our shared existence, the pursuit of truth is both a personal journey and a collective responsibility, one that can transform even the most unassuming community into a beacon of transparency and hope. Under a sweltering midsummer evening in a quiet college town, the atmosphere of routine reverberated through a modest community, where campus life and small-town traditions blended seamlessly. Students bustled between lecture halls and favorite cafes, and local residents strolled along tree-lined avenues while the warm breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass and the distant laughter of children at play. Yet beneath this veneer of normalcy, a chilling mystery was about to shatter the delicate equilibrium of everyday life. That night, as dusk gave way to darkness, the normally lively parking lot of a century-old community center became a stage for the unthinkable. In the shadow of a weathered brick building, where a faded sign read Community Hall, a passerby discovered a body lying motionless near a row of parked bicycles. The victim, identified later as Jason Keyes, was a young local teacher known for his affable manner and deep commitment to inspiring his students. He had been widely respected for his dedication and his quiet passion for literature and history, a beacon of hope in a town that prided itself on small-town values and genuine human connection. Jason's body was discovered by a maintenance worker who had come to retrieve a misplaced set of keys from behind a row of neglected benches. The worker, startled by the scene, immediately called for help. Jason lay face down on the cracked pavement, his once vibrant eyes now fixed in a vacant stare, and his hands were splayed as though he had reached out for something that was just beyond his grasp. Near his outstretched fingers, partially obscured by a stray lock of hair, was a torn scrap of paper. In hurried, nearly illegible script, the note read, "Some secrets remain hidden for a reason." Within minutes, local law enforcement arrived, their flashing blue and red lights painting the silent parking lot in a grim mosaic. Detective Cassandra Reed, a resolute and insightful investigator known for her methodical approach and empathy, took charge of the scene. Stepping carefully over the boundary marked by yellow tape, Cassandra's eyes scanned every detail. The position of Jason's body, the subtle smudge of blood on the concrete, and the faint imprint of footprints leading away from the scene. There was an eerie calm to the area, as if the perpetrator had taken great care to leave behind an unsettling message rather than a chaotic display of violence. Over the following days, Detective Reed devoted herself to piecing together the final moments of Jason Keyes' life. Interviews with students, colleagues, and local residents revealed a man whose life had been marked by kindness and quiet determination. Marla, a fellow teacher at the local elementary school, recalled that Jason had grown increasingly secretive in recent weeks. "He would come to work with a faraway look in his eyes," she said softly. "I asked him if something was bothering him, but he only smiled and said he was chasing down old records, something about missing details in our town's archives. I never thought it would lead to this." Other staff described how Jason had frequently stayed late in the classroom after hours, poring over dusty books and old newspapers in the cramped library of the community center, jotting down notes in a small leather-bound notebook that he always carried. Eager to understand what might have driven Jason to such a tragic end, Detective Reed secured a search warrant for his small apartment, a modest space lined with books, vintage photographs, and cherished mementos of a life dedicated to teaching. In a desk drawer tucked away under a faded tablecloth, officers discovered his notebook. Its pages were filled with meticulous entries detailing his investigations into local history. Early pages recorded mundane classroom activities and reflections on his favorite literary passages, but as the pages progressed, the tone grew darker and more urgent. Jason had begun to notice puzzling inconsistencies in the town's public records, records that chronicled decades of property transfers, old contracts, and council minutes. One entry, written in a hurried scrawl just days before his disappearance, read, "I've compared the official documents with the archived originals. There are discrepancies, names missing, amounts altered, transactions that make no sense. I fear that someone has rewritten our past, and if I expose it, I might be putting myself in harm's way." His careful, deliberate notes hinted at a long-concealed secret that had drawn the ire of those who benefited from a manipulated historical record. Digital forensic experts later managed to recover fragments of deleted emails from Jason's university-provided laptop. Among these were terse messages exchanged with an anonymous contact, who signed off as Zephyr. One of the recovered texts warned, "Do not dig too deep, or you will pay the ultimate price." Although the sender's identity was masked behind layers of encryption, the threat was unmistakable, lending an air of foreboding to Jason's research and suggesting that his inquiries had disturbed a powerful force determined to keep certain truths buried. As Detective Reed pieced together the evidence, she turned her attention to the town archives housed in the century-old municipal building, a repository of dusty files and yellowed documents that had once served as the foundation of Red Cliff's history. With the help of the local archivist, Mr. Leonard Ortiz, a meticulous man with a deep respect for history, Reed examined the original property deeds and council records dating back to the mid-20th century. What she found was alarming. Numerous documents, especially those concerning the transfer of land along the town's main thoroughfare, had been subtly altered. In some cases, names of original property owners had been omitted, and sale prices had been revised in a manner that would significantly benefit a select group of local investors. The irregularities were too precise to be accidental. They pointed to a deliberate effort to rewrite the town's history in favor of a small influential circle known simply as the consortium. Further investigation revealed that the consortium, a shadowy network of local businessmen and civic leaders, had long maintained a stranglehold over key public records. Publicly, they were celebrated for their contributions to community projects, from building schools to funding local parks. Privately, however, there were whispered accounts of covert deals, under-the-table transactions, and a systematic effort to erase any record of controversial land deals. Jason's research, it appeared, had uncovered the very details that the consortium had worked so hard to conceal. Detective Reed arranged discreet interviews with several longtime residents who had witnessed changes in the town's development over the decades. Mrs. Evelyn Carter, a septuagenarian, who had lived in Red Cliff all her life, recalled a time when the town's public records were straightforward and transparent. "Back in my day, every sale, every transaction was recorded for all to see," she said, her voice filled with nostalgia and sorrow. "But over time, I noticed that certain details began to vanish, names of families that once owned the land, amounts that didn't match up. I always thought it was just an error, until now." Her recollections added a human dimension to the stark evidence, reinforcing the idea that someone had systematically manipulated the official narrative. Digital analysts worked to reconstruct the timeline of the deleted emails and text messages from Jason's devices. The recovered fragments from Zephyr revealed an escalating series of warnings. In one reconstructed message, the sender ominously stated, "Your curiosity will lead to your silence. Stop now, or you will vanish." The words, sparse and chilling, suggested that the anonymous correspondent was either directly involved in the conspiracy or an agent of those determined to protect the consortium's interests. As the investigation deepened, Detective Reed's team collaborated with federal agents to trace the financial records associated with the altered property deeds. Forensic accountants uncovered a pattern, small discrepancies in sale amounts and ownership details that, when aggregated over time, indicated a substantial misappropriation of funds. The diverted sums were funneled into an offshore account linked to a shell corporation with ties to several prominent local figures. Although the exact identities of the top conspirators remained obscured behind legal redactions, the financial trail was clear. It pointed to a deliberate and long-standing effort to consolidate power and rewrite history for personal gain. Faced with this mounting evidence, Detective Reed compiled an extensive report detailing every element of the investigation, from the discovery of Jason Keyes's lifeless body near the parking lot to the digital reconstructions of his deleted communications and the painstaking comparisons of public records. The dossier, a comprehensive mosaic of handwritten notes, reconstructed emails, financial data, and eyewitness testimonies, was submitted to the district attorney in a series of confidential briefings. Recognizing the broader implications of the case, one that not only involved the death of a dedicated teacher but also exposed systemic corruption that had altered the very foundations of Red Cliff's history, the district attorney promptly convened a grand jury. In a series of tense sessions held in a modest county courthouse, the grand jury scrutinized the amassed evidence. Expert witnesses testified about the digital techniques used to recover the deleted messages, the forensic methods that revealed the alterations in the public records, and the financial analysis that demonstrated how small, repeated discrepancies amounted to a deliberate misallocation of funds. Their testimony painted a damning picture of a network of corruption that spanned decades, a conspiracy designed to protect the interests of a powerful few by erasing inconvenient truths from the historical record. After lengthy deliberations, the grand jury returned indictments on multiple charges, including fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to homicide, directly linking the systematic cover-up to the murder of Jason Keyes. The trial that followed was a protracted and emotionally charged process that captivated both the local community and observers beyond Red Cliff. In a packed courtroom filled with concerned citizens, academic scholars, and members of the media, federal prosecutors presented their case with painstaking precision. Digital forensic analysts demonstrated, using detailed visual reconstructions, how the deleted messages formed a coherent chain of threats. Forensic accountants showcased meticulously prepared charts that illustrated how minute discrepancies in property records, when viewed cumulatively, revealed a massive diversion of funds. Local historians provided a moving account of Redcliffe's evolving narrative, a narrative that had been carefully curated by those in power to hide uncomfortable truths. Each piece of evidence, from the torn scrap of paper found at the scene to the faded ink in Jason's journal, was presented as a testament to the deliberate manipulation of history. Detective Reed took the stand, her testimony imbued with both professional clarity and personal grief. She recounted the grim discovery in the parking lot, the sight of Jason's body, the stark message he left behind, and the painstaking process of gathering the evidence that had led to uncovering a decades-long conspiracy. Her measured yet impassioned delivery brought the story of a man dedicated to unearthing hidden truths into sharp focus, and as she detailed each element, the altered deeds, the recovered emails, the financial irregularities, the courtroom was held in a tense silence, absorbing the weight of a community's lost trust. In the end, several mid-level administrators and contractors, linked directly to the manipulation of public records, were convicted on charges of fraud and conspiracy, receiving lengthy prison sentences that echoed through the corridors of Redcliffe's institutions. Yet many felt that full justice remained elusive. The highest-ranking conspirators, those who had masterminded the cover-up from behind layers of influence and secrecy, managed to evade the harshest penalties by exploiting intricate legal defenses and the protective shield of their long-standing power. Their identities, though whispered about in private, remained largely redacted in public records, a bitter reminder that even in the wake of significant legal victories, some of the most powerful figures could remain shrouded in mystery. In the months and years following the trial, Redcliffe slowly began to rebuild its trust in public institutions. The town government, under new leadership and facing fierce public scrutiny, introduced sweeping reforms to ensure that historical records would be maintained transparently. Independent oversight committees were established, and regular audits of property transactions and public funds became standard practice. Community forums were held where citizens demanded that the truth be preserved for future generations, and local educators incorporated the case into their curricula as a cautionary tale of what can happen when power goes unchecked. Local media outlets produced a series of investigative reports and documentaries that recounted the unfolding of the case, how a quiet teacher's curiosity had led him to uncover a network of corruption, and how his determination to seek the truth had ultimately cost him his life. University professors and scholars discussed the case in seminars on public ethics and historical revisionism, highlighting the critical importance of maintaining accurate public records. The legacy of Jason Keyes, despite the tragic circumstances of his death, became a rallying point for those who believed that every hidden secret, no matter how deeply buried, must eventually be brought into the light. For Detective Reed, the case became a defining moment, a lifelong reminder that even in a small town, the forces of corruption can run deep, and that the pursuit of truth requires both courage and unwavering dedication. In the quiet hours of early morning, when the first light of dawn bathed Redcliffe in a gentle glow, she would often return to her modest office to review the recovered documents, the worn pages of Jason's journal, the meticulously reconstructed digital trails, and the redacted entries in the public records served as constant reminders of the high price that sometimes must be paid for transparency. Though the names of the highest conspirators remained obscured, each new piece of evidence reaffirmed her belief that no secret is too well guarded to escape scrutiny. As the seasons turned, Redcliffe slowly transformed. Public trust, once eroded by decades of manipulation, began to be restored through new policies and an unyielding commitment to accountability. The town's archives were digitized and made accessible to every citizen, ensuring that the history of Redcliffe would never again be subject to covert alterations. Memorials were erected in quiet public spaces, a simple bench along the river with an inscription in honor of Jason Keyes, and annual commemorative events dedicated to preserving the truth. The legacy of the case became a symbol of resilience and the enduring power of inquiry, a reminder that the courage to question, no matter the cost, is a cornerstone of a just society. Detective Cassandra Reed continued her work with a deep-seated sense of purpose, her career forever shaped by the lessons learned from that fateful autumn. Every new investigation was approached with the same careful scrutiny and determination to expose hidden truths. In her heart, she knew that while some mysteries might never be fully resolved, the relentless pursuit of justice was a commitment that defined not only her career but also the future of Red Cliff. Each uncovered detail, every revised record, every decrypted message was a step toward ensuring that the community's history remained untainted by corruption. Years later, as the quiet murmur of everyday life resumed along Red Cliff's sun-dappled streets and the gentle flow of the river continued to bear witness to the passage of time, the legacy of the investigation endured, a living reminder of the sacrifices made by those who dared to confront the past. The story of Jason Keyes and the dark web of manipulated records became interwoven with the town's identity, a testament to the enduring belief that every hidden secret has a way of coming to light, even in the face of powerful forces determined to keep it concealed. And so, as the early morning light broke over Red Cliff and the community gathered once again to celebrate a new day, aware, vigilant, and united by the memory of one brave soul, the relentless pursuit of truth remained the highest calling. In the interplay between history and justice, between the soft murmur of the river and the determined footsteps of those seeking accountability, the legacy of that long, winding investigation continued to inspire, a promise that no matter how deep the deception, every stone would eventually be turned, every secret laid bare, and every act of integrity celebrated in the collective memory of the people.